All right, so today I'm going to share with you guys my gumbo recipe. There are millions of gumbo recipes out there, and I have just taken ideas and samples from gumbos that I've tasted and liked, and said, they added another little twist to it. So I've kind of combined all of those to make a gumbo that I'm very pleased with. So I'm here to share it with you. All right, so first I'd like to share with you my ingredients. I will be using bell pepper of all colors. I love color in my dishes, so you will see me use the orange, yellow, red, and green bell peppers. And I'll probably use a quarter of each of the bell peppers for this dish. I will use about a cup of celery, or I'll slice these in half, chop them up finely, and use that as well. I will be using a yellow onion. I will also be using green scallions or green onion. We have a cup of flour. We have a half a cup of oil, vegetable oil, canola oil. I have vegetable oil, but you can use canola oil. And then I have about 3 or 4 bay leaves that I will be using. I have minced garlic. I have fresh thyme. I have some growing in the garden, but it's not quite ready yet. So bought this from the store. I will chop that up and use it. I'll be using a Creole seasoning. What I like to add is a gumbo fowl. It kind of gives it a good rich flavor. Plus it also thickens the soup to turn it into that gumbo. But I will say okra, adding okra will also help with that, and we will have sliced okra, which is not out here right now, but I will have add okra as well. So I will have the Worcestershire sauce, we have that. We have the Dale's liquid seasoning, and you can use either or. I'm just showing them both as that's an ingredient that I kind of switch in between. Some parsley flakes. It's really good to have the fresh ones, but the dry work as well. And then you probably want to have 2 of these, but one for drinking, but one for this recipe. So, and again, you could use any beer. So a bottle of beer for this recipe. And what is not shown here, also we'll be using a stick of salted butter. We have the sausage. So I have a chicken andouille sausage. And so I'll be browning that and showing you guys how I add that to the recipe. I have about 2 pounds of shrimp here, raw and deveined. I actually peeled it and I saved the shrimp shells, and I'll show you how I will be adding that to the dish, or utilizing that to make like a shrimp stock. And then I have a few more goodies because again I'm making a seafood gumbo. So I picked up a mixed bag of seafood that had mussels in it, crab meat, also, what else is in here? Let's see, mussels, a few shrimp, that type of thing. And then I have some crab legs. So I want you guys to get a good look at the crab legs. We'll be breaking those up and adding those to the dish as well. So as far as the seafood, I'll refrigerate that until, it's all washed and clean, but I'll refrigerate those things until we need it later on during the dish. A couple of other ingredients that you will need. We need 64 ounces of broth. And I'm going to kind of make a little shrimp broth using the shells that I called out earlier. These are 32 ounce bottles. I use the bone broth, 32 ounce of that, because it's more like a chicken stock. It's more flavorful because they actually boil the bone and get some of that marrow flavoring out of there. And then I use 32 ounces of chicken broth. So I kind of do that in combination to make 64. I also use, this is the unsalted butter that I mentioned earlier but did not show. All right, so now we're going to start the shrimp broth flavoring to start, and that's where we're going to use this half a stick of the butter. So about 1/4 of the butter. The temperature we're going to put on medium high and start that to melting. We're also going to go ahead and add the shrimp shells. So again, these were just the shells from the shrimp that I peeled earlier in preparation. And I want you guys to see this. This is from cooking gumbo previously. So this is my gumbo spoon, and it's nothing wrong with it. It's definitely clean, but you're going to need that when cooking here. So I want to get this melted in. The shells will not be going into the meal itself. We will strain this later. So I don't want you guys to think that this is going in to your gumbo. It is not. The juices from it though, the delicious juices from it will be going into your gumbo. You can also skip this step if you're not wanting to do this process, and just use the chicken broth. Not a big deal. I've seen it done in plenty of recipes, but I do think that this gives it that extra flavor that you definitely would want to need. So now I'm opening the bone broth. Again, the 32 ounces of bone broth, and I'm adding that. It's going to be thick flavor. And if you don't have the bone broth, I have added bouillon cubes to this regular chicken broth. But when I use the bone, I feel that I don't need the bouillon cubes. I am now adding the 32 ounces of regular chicken broth. See, that's a little bit lighter. Get it all out. Just gonna give that a stir. Make sure my butter is good and melted in there. Let that heat up. Once that comes to a boil, I will reduce the heat and just let it simmer for about 15 minutes so it can get all of those flavorful juices out. All right, so we'll come back and check on that. All right, so while we're letting our shrimp stock simmer for about 15 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and start browning our sausage. So I want to turn this on, and I have it on high in our stock pot. So this is where I'm going to actually be making the gumbo, in the stock pot. This is a fairly thin stock pot, so browning times, cook times may vary based on the pot that you use. But again, on a good medium high, you can start to brown. I like this thinner pot because it is quicker for me to cook the gumbo. All right, so as you can see, our sausage has browned. So we can now pull it from the heat, and the darkness that you see in the pot, that's a good thing. We want to use that. That's where the flavor comes from. So another thing I like about having a lighter or thinner stock pot is that I can lift it with one hand and maneuver. So but if you are using a heavy one, make sure you have something that you can scoop the sausage out with, but leaving as much of the juice, it's not much, but as much of the juice in the bottom of the pot as possible. And we will add that back in there a little bit later. Return it to the heat. And at this point, we're going to add the vegetable oil. Remember, that was a half a cup of vegetable oil. And we're going to get that to start. We're going to get that to start cooking or heating back up. Again, we are at like a medium heat right now because of my pan. If you're using a thicker pan, I would suggest doing a medium to medium high heat for that pan. Don't be afraid to adjust based on it. You don't want to heat the oil up too fast. But this is the most important part, and probably the part that scares people the most. I know it scared me the first few times I did it. But this is how you make your roux. So now that that oil is heating up, you want to gradually add, remember we had a cup of flour, so you want to gradually add and stir the flour. Gradually add and stir the flour, stir it so that it's not getting clumpy in there. You want to be able to make, add more oil if you need to, take away oil. So you want to just add that as slow as possible to the roux. And my pan takes about 15 minutes to get the dark color that we are looking for in a roux. I like my roux pretty dark. So I know mine takes about 15 minutes for that color, the color that I like to see. But for thicker pans, it could range from 20 to 30 minutes before you get the consistency of the color that you want. I added a little more oil, so I would suggest probably a cup of vegetable oil to a cup of flour. And it's okay, I make those adjustments all the time. So if you feel like it's getting too thick on you, just add a little bit more oil. But this is the consistency that you would want to have. And again, never stop stirring. Keep stirring during this process. So we're going to keep this, again, I'm on medium heat. I have all the flour in the mix. It's very light right now, and we're looking for a pretty dark. I like the roux to be pretty dark, but not burnt. So there's kind of a thin line there. This pot typically takes about 15 minutes because of the thinness. So if it's a little thicker, you may need more time. I don't think it's any that are thinner than this, so at least 15 minutes on a thin pot, maybe 30 on anything thicker. Alright, so I'll keep stirring and show you guys what it looks like in a few minutes. Alright, so we're back at about halfway through. I'll go ahead and add my butter, that other half of the stick of butter in to the mix. It's a little hot, but you see how it has darkened. We're almost to that consistency of the dark roux that I like. Love this color that we're getting. So you'll see a change from a caramel to a macchiato. And I'm looking for the mocha, a good mocha. So again, I'm scraping the bottom as I stir. And with these pots being so tall, if you're shorter, it can be a difficult task. But once you get past this part, things are a breeze. Almost to that color that we're looking for. The butter's all melted in. And I think we are just about ready. now have that chocolate color roux that we were looking for. As you can see, it is a nice dark brown, but not a burnt roux. So now that we've reached that point, we can start adding in the vegetables. We're first starting with the diced onion. You want to add them all to the pot and then continue stirring. As you stir, you want to make sure that you're also scraping the bottom of the pot. Adjust your temperature if needed. Again, I'm cooking in a thinner stock pot, so my temperature is a little lower than medium. But the onions take a little bit longer to cook, so we're going to stir those and let them cook for about 5 minutes before adding all of the other vegetables. Remember to continue to scrape the bottom of the pot, and all of that flavor, that darkness that you saw at the bottom of the pot or see at the bottom of the pot will start to give flavor to your gumbo. Now that it has been 5 minutes, we're ready to add in all of our other vegetables. That's the celery, the multicolored bell pepper, as well as the scallions or green onions. It will get a little bit tougher to stir, but what you're seeing now at the bottom, if you're scraping the pan as you're doing this process, you'll start to clear the darkness from the bottom. You're kind of picking up all of that taste as you cook the vegetables. But the acid from the vegetables are helping in the cleaning of the bottom of the pan so that you don't have to struggle with that later on in the process. It'll be all a part of the goodness of the gumbo here. So again, stir. Remember to continue to scrape the bottom of the pan and make sure you're not cooking it too high to where it is not easily coming up from the bottom as you stir. After you cook those vegetables for another 5 minutes, we are then adding in our minced garlic. Now we're going to stir in our minced garlic. You only have to stir this in or cook this in for approximately a minute. So if you need to set timers during this process, please remember to do so. You don't want to overcook the vegetables or overcook the roux in this step and ruin the gumbo. So just make sure that you are continuously stirring, keeping an eye on your temperature. If things start to really stick to the bottom of the pan, remember to reduce the heat. And now it is time to add in my favorite part, the bottle of beer. And again, it could be any beer of your choice. Just make sure that you pour it in, continue to give it a good stir. And by this time, the darkness at the bottom of the pot should really loosen up. And if you could see it, it would be pretty clean towards the bottom. So the beer definitely helps with that, as well as adding flavorful goodness to your gumbo. All right, so the smell coming from that shrimp stock smells so delicious. It is ready. We can give it just a little bit of a stir there, as you can see. So all of that shrimp flavoring, I'm sure, has gotten there. So this pot is pretty heavy, but I have my strainer up and I'm going to lift it and just pour this mixture over the strainer to catch all of the shells so that we're not eating that. So now that we have our beer in, we have our shrimp stock / chicken stock in. That was 64 ounces total that we were letting simmer in a pot until we were ready for this moment. Now we're going to increase that temperature and bring everything back to a boil. Stirring and again scraping the bottom of the pot. And once we get this up to a boil, then we're going to start adding in our dry ingredients. Okay, so our pot got up to a boil, and so now it's time to add in those dry ingredients. And I'm adding in the gumbo fowl. This one is Tex Joy, but there's several different brands of it. And I just measure this out sparingly based on how much I have. That was probably a 1/4 cup. Take that and stir it in. Next, I'm adding the thyme, trying to separate it from my bay leaves that I had there together. So the thyme is going in. If you don't have that, I have used complete seasoning before. I typically have that on hand if I don't have fresh thyme. And then I'm adding, this is the a Creole seasoning, original. So just based on how much of a kick you want is what you would put in. We like it a little spicy at my house, but my daughter is not, she's the one person that doesn't like it so spicy. So I will kind of go mild on it today. So, but that what I just put in was probably a couple of tablespoons, and it will go a long way. And then again, I just pour a little bit of the Worcestershire sauce in there, and then I kind of just measure that based on the pot that the amount of juice that I have in my pot. So I would say with that, I would probably do about 3 tablespoons of the Worcestershire sauce. Also, I did not have fresh parsley. I thought that I did. So since I don't, I'm actually using the parsley flakes, and I just sprinkle enough in there to mix in. And know when you don't have fresh ingredients, it's okay to use what you have in your house. So now that that's all in there, we can go and add remember the sausage that we browned earlier? We can add that back to the mix. And right now, my pot, because of this thinness again, is on a medium low. I'm going to increase it just a little bit so that we can keep a simmer going. So not quite to medium, but brought it back. And the smell, guys, is just delicious. This smells delicious. For that, our last ingredient, we're going to add the bay leaves. So 3 to 4 bay leaves in there, and give it another stir. That enhances the flavor as well. I put that in almost every soup, gumbo or soup that I make. So all right, now we're going to increase it now to about a little over a medium, because I want to get it back to a boil. Shortly, we'll let this boil for about 10-15 minutes, simmer I should say, bring it to a boil, reduce it back to simmer for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll start adding in our seafood ingredients, my favorite part. See you in a second. So it's been simmering now for about 15 minutes. I think everything is good and mixed in. One thing I wanted to add, that if you don't have like a very flavorful sausage, you can also add some sausage seasoning in. There's this dry sausage seasoning, and sometimes I do that. This time I had a pretty flavorful sausage, so I didn't need it. But then I'm going to add some cut okra to it, and it's just frozen cut okra. If you have whole okra, you can put that in as well. You can cut frozen whole okra. You can use fresh okra. It just wouldn't take, I don't think it takes as long to cook. Some people at this point pick out the bay leaves, but I do not. My family just knows to kind of eat around it. Don't eat the leaf if it comes into your bowl. But you know, some people are particular and will pick it out. So I've added the okra there. It takes about 8 minutes to cook in there. And now we're ready to add our prepared broken up crab legs. Again, these are just snow crab legs. You can use Alaskan crab legs if you want. Just depending on, you know, who you're serving and what the occasion is, I think. But these were previously frozen. So we bought a case of snow crab legs that we kind of keep in the freezer. But you can, of course, use the fresh, which I think are previously frozen in the store, from the store too. But still really good meat coming from them. And again, it takes about 8 minutes for that to kind of heat up and bring the flavor to the pot. So in the meantime, while you're waiting on that 8 minutes, and hopefully it'll get back up to a good simmer here soon. But while you're waiting on that 8 minutes, you can cover your pot, and I leave it crack just a little bit. And right now I have it a little bit above medium to kind of get it back to that boil. You can set a timer, which I'm about to do. Hey Google, set a timer for 8 minutes.
8 minutes, starting now.
Thanks. Because this is one of those that I don't want to overcook when it comes to, you know, adding the seafood ingredients. So at about the 5 minute or 3 minute countdown mark, that is when I will add the previously cooked seafood mix. So it was a frozen seafood mix bag that I got from Sam's Club. And I just, you know, got about 1/4 of the bag that I'm using for this. And then I will also add the shrimp in, because it only takes about 3 to 5 minutes for that to heat up and marry with everything else. So in the meantime, I am cooking my rice. So, you know, feel free to use the downtime to prepare your rice. And you can add the rice to the dish if you prefer that, to be simple. But I would definitely add more stock or water. All right, so everything's been in there now for about 5 minutes. Rice is on and ready. Again, you continuously keep stirring the pot. So now it is time to add our raw shrimp in. It typically takes 3 to 5 minutes to cook. So give it a good stir. You definitely want to, you know, measure out your ingredients for your pot, because you don't want to have very little room for your gumbo or the ingredients that you're adding. So just be careful as you start to get creative and add more things. You got to think about, is my pot big enough for all of that? And if you're adding more, you may want to cut back on the amount of other ingredients. So less crab leg if you want to do more shrimp. If you're adding like a seafood medley like we are, then you want to make sure that you're cutting back on a few of the other ingredients so that everything fits. Smelling absolutely delicious. And as you can see, the shrimp they're already turning pink. So there, 3 to 5 minutes is all you need on those. And now that we're a little bit closer to the end, I'm going to add in the already cooked. I just thawed out, so the juices from where it was thawed is in there. We have everything added, so I think a couple more minutes. Let it get back up to a boil. heat everything in, and it'll be flavorful from the first taste, and then it gets better the next day, even better the next day. But look at the nice rich color. Look at all of the meat that's in the pot. You know, I have gone and had gumbo at places, and I'm like, where's the meat? Where is the meat? But I don't think we're gonna have that problem today. We got plenty of it and plenty to go around. All right, so we'll bring that up to a boil and just for another minute or so, and you have completed your gumbo. All right, so as far as plating, I typically I cheat a little bit and use just a simple measuring cup, the cup version of the measuring cup, and I fill that with rice, kind of square it off, pat it in with the spoon here. The smell of this is just so yummy. And then I have these chili bowls, or I guess they're French onion dip bowls. But I like to use it for all of my soups and chilies and everything. But you turn it upside down and it keeps a cute little shape. I don't know if you guys can see the shape of that it makes, but it keeps a cute little shape. And then I just take this, oh goodness smelling gumbo here, and I give it a good stir, making sure I can pick up pieces from the bottom, and then I just pour the ingredients over the rice in the bowl, and I dip down and just get a little bit of the juices, making sure I get a few more shrimp pieces and whatever might have been missed, and voila. Again, I'll show you that I just measure it out in a cup, a measuring cup. You can use some of the smaller ones if you don't want as much rice. So you can use the half a cup, fourth of a cup, whichever one you want. It makes the perfect circle. Stir your pot up. Try not to eat directly out of the pot. I know it will be hard. Take it and you pour it over your rice, dip down just to get the juices and pour that over. That's where you can see all the colorful bell peppers and things that we use. And you can replace some of these in here to give it a little look. Love when the claw sticks out. But here are two of the finished products, and my family's been hounding me all day. I could just tell. So this in all took about 2 hours between prep time and from beginning to end. But it is so worth it. All right, so we're all plated up, smelling delicious. The aroma is probably already ringing the bell. But before I ring the bell, I just ask that you hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And we will see you guys on the next one. Time to eat!